Welcome back to the GSMC College Football Podcast, presented to you by the GSMC Podcast Network on this Wednesday, May 21st. We've had a good show so far, but we are going to continue on, keep pushing. We're going to talk a little bit about some wide receivers right now, and who has been wide receiver you of the past decade or so. So I kind of looked at numbers since 2015, and I looked at four schools. You have the Alabama Crimson Tide, the Ohio State Buckeyes, the LSU Tigers, and the USC Trojans. Now, all of these schools have cases, right? I kind of went down the list. I looked at how many draft picks there have been at the wide receiver position for each of these schools since 2015. So you look at Alabama first. Amari Cooper, first rounder, number 4 overall pick, 2015. Then you had Arjarius Stewart. There was kind of a lull there. 2018, Calvin Ridley gets drafted. Then Henry Ruggs, Jerry Jeudy, both in 2020. 2021, another great year. Jalen Waddle, DeVonta Smith get drafted. Jamison Williams gets drafted the next year in the first round in 2022. John Mechie also gets drafted that year in the second round. And then there's kind of been a lull since then. Jermaine Burton was drafted in the third round in 2024, but besides that, kind of been a little low. However, when you look at the total numbers, 7 first-rounders and 1 Heisman winner in that time. You have guys that have put together multiple Pro Bowl seasons. Amari Cooper, one of my favorite wide receivers ever to watch at the college football level. The way he ran routes, how polished he was, a guy that was super impressive coming out of college. 5-time Pro Bowler, has been able to produce a really long, successful NFL career across multiple teams. Raiders, Cowboys, Browns, even the Bills last season. This is a guy that's been a great wide receiver in the National Football League. Calvin Ridley, another guy that had a really solid career for Alabama, has kind of been up and down. His career really got derailed after that suspension for gambling a few years back. Jerry Jeudy, a guy that blossomed this year in Cleveland, had his first Pro Bowl season. A guy that there could be even better things coming from. Jalen Waddle, one of the fastest players in the NFL. A guy that has paired with Tyreek Hill for a dynamic wide receiver duo. His big kind of questions have been injuries, but no question the talent's there. Jalen Waddle, probably a top 15 wide receiver in the NFL. DeVonta Smith, a guy that his Alabama career was so impressive. He won the Heisman. This is a kid that won a Heisman as a wide receiver. So impressive. Kind of fell to Philly in a perfect landing spot. Pairs with A.J. Brown to have one of the most dynamic pass-catching duos in the NFL. Jamison Williams, also a guy that has kind of shown flashes throughout times for Detroit. But you look at that total group. 7 first-rounders. Guys, multiple guys that have had Pro Bowl seasons, a couple guys that are considered in the top 15, 20 of wide receivers in the NFL. Super impressive. But Ohio State, look at some of the guys they've had. Now, their success has really been in the past 3 to 5 years. Yes, you did have Michael Thomas get drafted in 2016 in the second round, a guy that at one point had an argument for the best receiver in the NFL, guy that set the receiving yards record, receptions record for the Saints at one point. Then you kind of had a little lull until Terry McLaurin, third rounder, 2019, a guy that has become Washington's number 1 wide receiver with some really terrible quarterback play that he's had to kind of go through. When you look at some of the guys that they've had at that position before Jaden Daniels, this is a guy that his wide receiver abilities cannot be questioned whatsoever. Kind of a little lull then until you get to 2022. And here's where Ohio State really starts to make their case. Garrett Wilson, first round, number 10 overall pick, 22. The pick right after him, Chris Olave, number 11 overall, 2022. The next year, Jackson Smith and Jigba, number 20 overall, 2023. 2024, then you get Marvin Harrison. It's his turn. First round, 4th overall, probably the best wide receiver prospect that they've had. Then this year, 25, another first rounder, Emeka Egbuka, 19th overall. So that is 4 straight years of a first-round wide receiver, and it could continue again this upcoming year. You look at guys like Carnell Tate. Could Carnell Tate kind of go into that next level? Brandon Inniss also has that potential. I would look more at Carnell Tate as the guy. Then you obviously have Jeremiah Smith, the next great one up. Could be the best out of all of them. Won't be draft eligible until 2027. This is a kid, absolute freak. I think he's probably the best one that we've seen come out of Ohio State so far, and we haven't even seen his full potential. We've only seen him as a true freshman, but a guy that's a freak. Ohio State's case, they've made on recency, right? The past 4 years, you look at what Garrett Wilson's done with the Jets, Chris Olave taking over as the number 1 guy for the Saints, Smith and Jigba going to step into a really huge role in Seattle this year with Tyler Lockett gone, with DK Metcalf gone. Marvin Harrison had a really solid rookie year, a guy that is going to be even better in year 2. And then Emeka Egbuka coming in for the Buccaneers, pairing with Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, a really interesting slot. Another program, too, is LSU. LSU, again, you kind of look at recently, but since 2020, Justin Jefferson, first rounder. Jamar Chase, 2021. Terrace Marshall. Keishawn Butte was a 6th rounder, but then the past year, Malik Nabers, Brian Thomas, both first rounders last year. The top 2 wide receivers is of that rookie class in the NFL this past season were Malik Nabers and Brian Thomas Jr. in their respective conferences. 2 super impressive guys. And then you have 2 guys that are arguably both have a case for the best receiver in the NFL. Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase. So this class, it's more on the star power. It's more about Jefferson, Chase, potentially Malik Nabers, potentially Brian Thomas. We're not sure who the next guy up, though, is at LSU. I don't know. There could be a couple different options, but right now, their case is based on star power. And you look at USC. Nelson Aguilar, Juju Smith-Schuster, Michael Pittman, Amon-Ra St. Brown, who's been their best wide receiver in the NFL, was the lowest drafted of all those guys in the 4th round in 2021. Drake London, first rounder. Jordan Addison, first rounder. So this is a little more kind of an interesting class. I had them here just because of some of the pedigrees of some of these guys, but I don't really think that they're on that same kind of level as Bama, LSU, Ohio State right now. So USC got to be 4 for me. Then each of the other schools kind of have a case. If you're looking at the entire decade, I think the choice is Alabama. When you look at Amari Cooper, Calvin Ridley, Jerry Jeudy, Jalen Waddle, DeVonta Smith, the depth there, the talent there is pretty remarkable. I think that gives them an edge over LSU at least. LSU, yes, you have Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, obviously 2 of the biggest names in the NFL. But after that, there's not a whole lot. Malik Nabers could be one of those guys, but he still has to prove it. Brian Thomas could be one of those guys, still has to prove it though. Alabama has a couple guys that are more proven, that are better placed for success right now, that have proven more in the NFL. Jalen Waddle has had Pro Bowl years. DeVonta Smith has had great seasons for the Eagles. Jerry Jeudy just had a Pro Bowl year with the Browns. Amari Cooper, obviously, multiple Pro Bowls. Calvin Ridley even had one. The depth there, I think, gives Alabama an edge. Now, Alabama or Ohio State. This is an interesting one. I think it's got to be Alabama. However, in the next couple years, I think it could certainly be Ohio State. If you look at what Garrett Wilson could potentially develop into, what Olave and Jigba, Marvin Harrison could all develop into, I think the potential there is greater for Ohio State if Marvin Harrison starts putting and stringing Pro Bowl seasons together. If Smith and Jigba takes over as the unquestioned number 1 in Seattle, the potential is there. It's higher for Ohio State. But right now, I think you have to go with Alabama. I think the pedigree here is just too much to ignore. I can certainly see this changing in the next 3 to 4 years as Ohio State gets more guys in. Carnell Tate, Brandon Inniss, Jeremiah Smith as that kind of wide receiver unit keeps churning out guys. I think this is a place where we can certainly see Ohio State overtake Alabama. But right now, I think it's the Alabama Crimson Tide as wide receiver U of the past decade. But it's certainly up for debate. That's just my take. I don't know. Everybody is entitled to their own opinion. I think it's the Tide, though. I think when you look at the production, when you look at some of those names, it just makes too much sense. Plus, you pair that with the guy that won a Heisman at wide receiver. I think that's a huge factor, too. I think it's the Alabama Crimson Tide. So right now, we are going to take our last break of the show. When we come back, we're going to continue on with our SEC rankings. I got 3 teams today. We're getting down to the last 2 days of this, but we're going to continue on when we come back on the GSMC College Football Podcast.